Jefferson said all men are created equal, but unfortunately at the time that he said that, it didn't necessarily include me. Some of the women in here didn't include you guys. It didn't include a lot of people that were poor, didn't own land. So there were a lot of things that still needed to improve about his way of thinking. And I always get questions about Jefferson saying, well, you know, what did you think of him? Were you mad at him? Well, I think he's a very wise man. He was a very wise man. He was beyond his years in thinking. He was and so intelligent. He was like a genius. And he did many great things for this country and for everyone and for all over the world. But he was still a slave owner. And a lot of people say, well, he was a good slave owner. Well, I don't know if that's possible. A good slave owner is a little bit difficult for me to wrap my mind around. But I still respect him, and I can't hate him because he's a part of me. I'm here because of him. So I don't, take away from any of the great things that he has done. But he still had a few things to work out in his own mind. And, it's a lot about people saying, he was a very conflicted man. He always talked about his head and his heart being in conflict. In his writings, he spoke about that a lot. And if anyone, has anybody taken a tour of Monticello? Anybody? Okay, all right. Go Monticello, lovely place. You will see in the first room, you can ask him, and some of the tour guides speak about how in the first room that you come to outside of the main room, it used to be painted black. And they believe that that room was painted black because Jefferson had intense migraine headaches. Well, if you're constantly saying one thing, living another way, it's kind of understandable how you're constantly just like, where am I, what am I doing? And your brain is going to explode. Because, for example, he wanted to free the slaves. He didn't want to have slavery, but yet he loved that free labor. He loved having all the luxurious life he had. He loved building a Monticello and tearing it down. He loved having his gardens. And so it was hard for him to be, and he was conflicted on what he should do and what he shouldn't do. And I always think, in some of the questions that people give to me when we're speaking of various things, I always wonder, why didn't he end slavery? He had the power, he had the influence. We know that it was a very difficult time at the time that he was living, and it was very difficult for him to make those type of changes, but he was a man who believed in change. He was a man that I think today would have been more than happy to change the way things are, but the people around him in those times, they were not as willing to change in some of the things that were going on at that time. So I think that would be one of my main questions for him if I ever had an opportunity to talk to him, and just ask him, why didn't you end slavery? What were the difficulties that are obvious? What are the other ones that were obvious, and why you couldn't at the time? And I just want to ask him a lot of times those questions, because a lot of people say it's really hard to wrap your mind around Jefferson, around that time, around that thinking. A lot of people blame him for what happened, but I don't think he's necessarily to blame, except for the fact that he did not end it when he could, or even the fact that he didn't free Sally Hemings when he died. Their relationship was very different than many other slave owners that people have said, because Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings are seen to be having a more love relationship. Now that can still be disputed by some, but some of the things that lead to it, for example, he agreed to free all of the Hemings children at the age of 21. Now, he may have wrote it down in the foreign books as Elizabeth Hemings ran away, but she had a pretty comfortable running away, because he gave her like $50 and put her on a stagecoach and had her saw away. So that's a pretty safe runaway if you ask me. But and some of the ways that they look at that relationship, and the fact that he really didn't engage and she didn't engage in any other relationships outside of theirs once they began their relationship, also points to a loving relationship. They were together for over 38 years, and a lot of people say, well, that's more than most people can stay married today. So, in the common law of what they went through and what they've gone through as a relationship, that's why people point to them as more as a loving relationship. And of course, for people in the family like myself, it'll be a little bit easier to think of it as them having a loving relationship than the latter of what could have happened at that time. So one of the things that we try to do is, again, work through a lot of the situations with family, with Martha was telling about, where some of the family don't want to be accepting or have trouble accepting. We say work through that. Have your moment of anger, about slavery, about the years that things weren't right in this world, and then start to overcome that. And we try to teach conflict resolutions as one of the ways to do that. Talk about your anger, get it out, get it out in the open, and then try to work through it to correct it, work through it to move on to a better life. And again, Martha and I have moved on. We're as neighbors, as she pointed out, and a lot of people do, I think, can learn from the Hemmings family and learn from the growth that we've gone through, that just because you look different doesn't mean you can't be family. Who in here has family? Everybody have family? Oh, good. We all have family. So no family's perfect. I'm sure you've all had issues in your family where you went through things. We just happen to have a color issue in our family that we worked through. And again, there are a lot of us that have changed, embraced each other, and I think that's the big lesson that people can take away from the Jefferson family and the things that Jefferson has taught, is that you can take away and still be family regardless of what society puts on you, regardless of the expectations. You still can work through those things and come out better, still saying that yes, our family is as equal as we're going to try to make it be.